Okay, and we are live. Welcome back, everyone, to another live event here on the 17thfloor.com. As a reminder, for those of you that are new, the 17th Floor is an online community focused on the growing practice of human capital management, which gathers Canadian HR, accounting, and payroll professionals together for peer-to-peer engagement, education, and mentorship. Every month, we try and do these live expert panels featuring industry guests in which we and our members can chat about the experiences in uplifting businesses by elevating the well-being of our employees. My name is Sam Fiorella. I'll be acting as your moderator today. I'm a member of the 17th Floor Community Management Team, as well as a member of the community itself. So today's webinar is helping your managers become better leaders. We got a lot of requests on this one and a lot of registrations. So obviously it's a very hot topic. We're going to be discussing the strategies to enhance HR practices, strengthen your leadership skills, and elevate overall organizational performance. And so we had to invite Kevin Eikenberry back for this one. This is the second time he's been joined us. Welcome, Kevin.
I'm glad to be here. I was just connecting myself so that I can actually chat in the comments if people put anything there. I think I've now done that. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be back with you, Sam.
Good, thank you. So for those of you that don't remember, Kevin is the founder, owner, and leader of the Kevin Eikenberry Group, thus the name Kevin Eikenberry. Kevin, we're gonna have to talk about some originality in your name.
There's all sorts of challenges we could talk about there. There's no doubt about it.
Kevin is, and the reason we've asked Kevin back, besides the fact that I just had such a great time with him last time, is he's a two-time best-selling author, speaker, consultant, trainer, and coach, because he has nothing else to do with his time, apparently. He spends his days writing, speaking, and coaching, consulting, training, and helping leaders make a difference in their organizations as well as the world around them. But most specifically, he's the author of the Long Distance Trilogy, which is the long distance leader, the long distance teammate, and most recently, the long distance team, a proven and practical guide for leaders to consciously design teams, which is why we're here today. So feel free to ask any questions for those of you that are following along on LinkedIn Live. If you're there, we'll try and get to as many of your questions live here as possible. If you are watching this on replay on our community, the 17thfloor.com, of course, feel free to post in the comments, and our community leaders will be happy to engage with you along with other members.
And I'll just say that if you do that and the community members want to connect it back to me, I'll be happy to answer anything. So if you're not here with us live, you're with us later, and there's something that you want help from me on, you can obviously connect with me or just leave the question there and they'll get it to me and I'll answer it.
Yeah, perfect. And I'm sure we'll be putting Kevin's direct contact information inside the bio here as well. So you'll be able to get that information if you want to reach out directly on LinkedIn or elsewhere. So let's get right into this. Kevin, I think before we can jump into this topic, I think it's really important for us to get some definitions out. And one of the things that I know I struggled with, and a lot of people do, is what's the difference between a manager and a leader? I think we need to start with those terms first.
That's a great place to start. In the English language, we use those words sometimes as synonyms, right? In fact, sometimes I've seen them listed as synonyms officially. And so that's a challenge because I don't think they're exactly the same thing. I mean, let me prove it to you all. If I said, give me a short definition of leadership, you'd give me some definition. You'd think about it. You'd come up with a definition. And then I said, give me a short definition of management or being a manager. You'd give me a different definition. You give me different words to describe it. Why? Because they're not exactly the same thing. Like they're related. And in fact, I would say, Sam, that if you are, and I even sometimes use them somewhat synonymously. Like I'll say, if you're a leader, manager, boss, supervisor, person, right? Like if we're describing the position, we would say that as a leader, you have management responsibilities. If you're a manager, you have leadership responsibilities. And so think about them this way. Think about like the MasterCard logo, like a Venn diagram. Like we got management here, we got leadership here, they overlap. And so to me, for our definitions, for our conversation today, we manage things, budgets, projects, processes, we lead people. Right. And so there are things about those that are certainly connected. And I would say as a leader, we are responsible for reaching outcomes with and through people. And so things about managing are inside of that. And yet it's far more complex to lead than it is to simply manage. Right. Because people are far more complex than things. Right. So there's my starting point for us.
So we manage things, we manage tasks, but we lead people.
That's how I like to think about it. If we're going to do it in sort of short form, and that whatever your job title is, if you're listening and joining us, both of them are your responsibility. There's a lot of stuff on the internet that says management's bad, leadership's good. I don't think that's correct. I think what people are trying to say is the way we used to lead was to only manage, and that's less than optimum. That I would agree with. But to label management as a bad thing, right, and management and leadership as a good thing is not necessarily the helpful way to think about it, because we really need to do both. It's really this conversation is, Sam, as you and I talked about as we prepped for this, it's about transforming from only managing to also leading, right?
Yeah, exactly. Good point. So what are the fundamental qualities then and traits of an effective leader?
Well, that's a loaded question, right? Lots of people would have comments about that. If we go back to my definition of being a leader, which is reaching valuable outcomes with and through others, that means that there are a number of things that we have to get better at, right? In my book, Remarkable Leadership, we talk about 13 competencies. Everyone has a different list. But for our purposes of our conversation today, I would say that to be a highly effective leader, there are certain things we can't be awful at, right? We have to be able to communicate a one-on-one and one-to-many. We have to be able to set a clear vision, goal, and help people move towards it. But I think for the purposes of our conversation today, we could say it's a bunch of the human stuff too, right? It's are you comfortable with coaching and giving feedback? Are you able and comfortable with working to build strong working relationships and build trust? Are you willing to do and able to do those kinds of things? If we think about it in terms of having a level of self-awareness that says, what am I bringing to the table in order for me to help my team reach valuable outcomes? Then we start to think about those softer things, right? Relationship building, influence, coaching, communication, listening. All of those things become critically important to us being effective as a leader.
And I think in this hybrid world, it becomes even more important, no?
100%, right? So, and I know that you know this, that my team is almost entirely virtual and has been for many, many years. And so it's one thing. Let's just talk about, in fact, I wrote this article, it's coming out tomorrow, that says, what's the one thing all leaders must do to be more effective? If it was one thing, I would say we must have more interactions and fewer transactions. We must interact with others and not just talk about the work. Right. And so being willing to do that, willing to work on that, I think becomes critical. And if having true interactions with our team members is critical, which I believe it is, that's harder to do at a distance than it is down the hallway, right? I'm walking down the hallway, I pass you in the hallway, I stop and ask about your family. We have a quick conversation, and it doesn't have to happen only in our one-on-ones or whatever. But if we're remote, to your point, or if we're virtual, if we're hybrid, whatever that is, then I've got to be far more intentional about making those conversations happen, right? I've got to be thinking about when and how I'm going to reach out to people, how I'm going to make sure that those happen, not just by happenstance in the hallway or at the end of the meeting or walking in from the parking lot or whatever.
I've seen a lot of guides right now that are talking about how to make those personal connections remote. And there's how-tos on a Zoom meeting or on a Google Meet or whatever you're using. Sure. And what we're seeing though in the results, it's you can't have those types of personal conversations and communication in a scheduled format. So I'm going to schedule a time for us to connect on a personal level. Well, it just doesn't translate well.
Yeah, what I would say there is, I definitely think we can make that happen in our one-on-ones. Like if you're not having regular one-on-ones with your team members, please start, and I can give you a little bit of format about how to do that. So let me come back to that. But to your point, Sam, I think it can't just be like, I think we have to be intentional about it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be scheduled. But what it does mean is if someone on your team reaches out to you, and I'll use the phone as a prop, they reach out to you. Here's what happens. Hey, Sam, I work for Sam. Hey, Sam, and I know you're super busy, right? I know you don't really have time, but I've got this quick question. So what I'm saying to Sam is I need to transact some business. And Sam needs to answer my question or help me solve my problem or whatever. That's true. But that's a moment then for Sam to say, well, but before you go, how you doing? Like, what's going on? How was the weekend? Like, I know that you were having this thing you were doing. Like, so Sam can still go to that even if I asked for the transaction, right? And he shouldn't necessarily stop and say, well, before I answer your question, but he can, Sam, you can use that as a moment, right? And creating valuable interactions doesn't have to be a 10-minute long conversations. Could be. You could be being willing to ask that, being willing to check in with someone, even in Slack or Teams or whatever tool you're using for chat, right? Just to reach out and see how people are doing, what they need, what if they need any help, if you can be of any assistance to them, just any of 100 things, right? That might be. So so we absolutely need to be intentional in finding the chances and the opportunities to do it. But I do think we can create that in our one-on-ones as well. The way to do it there is you got to start with that. Like, start with the non-work and then go into the agenda of your one-on-ones. I have a lot of thoughts about one-on-ones, but start with the non-work, because if you don't start with the non-work, you'll never get there. And it also tells the team members that if that's the first thing we talk about for 2, 3, 4 minutes, then it's clearly important, right? That's what goes into their subconscious, which is correct if you're willing to start there.
Now, focusing on how to teach people to become better leaders, there's a big component of emotional intelligence attached to this and to those core competencies. Why is first of all, what is emotional intelligence?
Well, everyone's got a definition, right? But ultimately, it comes down to us recognizing the importance of who we are and what we bring to every interaction, to every situation, and recognizing that there's more to the work than the task. That it's about who people are and what they bring, and recognizing all of that. Again, I'll use that word soft. And of course, the soft stuff is actually the hardest stuff. But being emotionally intelligent, without going into detailed definitions, is really being aware of and leaning into the human component of our work and of ourselves as it relates to our ability to interact with others.
And how teachable is that?
Well, here's my take on all of it, right? Like, so people will often say to me, Sam, are leaders made or are they born? And I always say the answer is yes, that who we are at birth plays a part in who we are. Like, you're going to lead, you can be a highly effective leader, and I can be a highly effective leader. Doesn't mean we have to lead exactly the same way. In fact, we shouldn't try to lead exactly the same way. Who we are and our genetics and our background, all that stuff plays a part in us being effective leaders. And yet, if you ask people to list the things that make people effective leaders, everything that people will list is a skill, which means it can be learned, right? It can be learned. That doesn't mean people will choose to learn it. Like, I am of the opinion that anyone who, any adult of sound mind and body, has the potential to be a highly effective leader. Now, not everyone will become a highly effective leader because it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of intention, and it takes a lot of time, right, to do it. So is it learnable? I absolutely believe it is learnable. Will everyone learn it? Well, history says no, right? Doesn't mean we can't. So if you think about that on the macro level, is different. But fundamentally, the mistake that organizations often make in selecting is they say, well, that person's got it and that person doesn't, and that person's got it. And then you're treating it like it's a birthright, right? It is like some people were born leaders. And I don't believe that's the case. Like, you have things, Sam, about who you are that if you lean into those things will be strengths for you and can help you be highly effective as a leader. Could be different than mine. But like I often will say to people, like, you remember when you learned how to ride a bicycle, and not everyone learns to ride at the same pace. Some people, have some motivation or have some genetics that help them learn it faster. But the best bike riders are not the people that learned it fastest. The best bike riders are who? The people that put their butt in a seat and keep
practicing.
Pedaling. To me, it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing as leadership, even though leadership is obviously far more complex than riding a bike.
On leadership, you've written that leadership is about reaching outcomes through others.
Right.
Indicating that there's a balance there between management and leadership is required. So how do we get people to go from being those good managers to being good leaders? Or is it a cart before the horse kind of thing? Or
no? I think it's two really big things. And hi to those of you saying hello in the chat. Calgary, Toronto, two places I'm happy to have been to many times. I'll say this. I think that it starts with mindset. Like if I think all it takes for me to be successful in my job is to manage tasks and manage stuff, then that's where I'll stop. Right. And I'll treat people like a cog in the wheel, so to speak. But we're having a conversation about something more than that right now. Right. So the first thing is for people to move from manager to leader. The first, there's an awareness and a mindset that says there's more to this than simply managing. That's the first part. So there's the mindset piece, which has to come before the skill set piece, which we were talking about before. But the other thing I think that's critical, and as many of you here are HR leaders and HR professionals, as organizations, we have to be very clear to those that we're bringing into the leadership roles what we expect of them. Like, what does it look like to be a leader here? And so the expectation piece is huge. So if we're never having that conversation, then we're going to get people who are trying to sort of copy what they've seen when they were being led. And then if that's either good or bad, and that was where you're going to head, right? And you're just going to slowly deteriorate, even if you started out with really, really great leaders. So the expectation piece is key. People can't live up to an expectation if they don't know what it is. And then the second piece of that is the mindset that says, oh, there's more to this than just getting stuff done, right? Those would be the two things I would say.
Yeah, that's great. On just as kind of the next level up, there's a lot of talk around fostering positive and inclusive work cultures right now. How much of this is on the manager or the leader in the organization to head this up? And does it matter if you're a good manager or a good leader? Would a good leader drive that more?
Well, I would say probably we would say a leader would drive that more than a manager. But even if you told a manager, and again, we're sort of slicing up the words here a little, but like, let's say you were a good manager, didn't really think of yourself as a leader. If you were given the task to go do this stuff around DE&I, for example, then you would go do the task. But that wouldn't be the same as you really bringing your full self to it and who you are as well, which, that emotional intelligence piece that we were talking about before. So that's what I'd say first. But the second thing I would say is that what's the role of us as managers, leaders, people in this process? The number one thing that we need to do is to role model it. Like, if we want our teams to be inclusive, we best be, right? If we want our teams to value the input, respect the background, want to bring the best from everyone to the table, then we've got to be doing that. And we can put people through training, and we can set clear expectations. We can do a whole bunch of stuff to help raise our awareness and skill around all of the DE&I stuff. And that's fine. And that's good. But ultimately, it's not going to happen until people do stuff. And the doing of it doesn't happen in a workshop. The doing of it doesn't happen with awareness. The doing of it happens by doing it. And that means it starts with watching someone else do it well, who then is having a conversation with you, right? So I think the role of a leader is to be role modeling that stuff. And that's the single best thing that we can be doing first.
Leading by example.
Yeah, 100%. Like, here's the thing, everybody. If you're a leader or manager, supervisor, boss, person, you are leading by example. Because they're watching. Sam, the only question is the example that we're leaving the one we want them to follow, right? Like they're already watching us. Like, here's an example. People will say to me often, Kevin, why is my team so negative? How do I deal with negative teams? And which I always want to say, let's start by you looking in the mirror. Now, I'm not saying that you could be really positive and still have some negativity on your team. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm always saying that's the first place I'm going to start. Like, what's the example I'm leaving? Because that one is going to be watched a lot more than we realize. Even if we've been a manager or leader for a really long time, we get up in the morning, look ourselves in the mirror, put on our pants and go to work, right? Assuming even if you're working virtually, I'm hoping you're putting on pants, right? So like you're doing that and you're not thinking about the fact that everyone's watching all the time. Even if we're virtual, they're paying attention to what we're saying, what we're not saying, how we're saying it, when we're saying it, what the priorities are. If we have our one-on-ones and we talk about how they're doing, they know that we care about them, as an example, like on and on and on. We are role modeling. The only question is, are we setting the example that we really want them to follow?
Yeah, and I think a lot of us don't realize that we follow strict guidelines. We do what we're told. We have a manual that we work with, and we focus on the tasks that we hand out, the meetings that we have, how short the meetings are, that sort of thing. And we forget that people are paying more attention to what we say and do than what we're assigning or how we're managing tasks.
Well, yeah, how we're assigning, what we're assigning, certainly all that matters, but they're looking at, they all have access to your calendar. They know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And is the calendar matching up with the values that you're espousing, right? If you're saying you guys are the most important part of my work is for me to support you all, but you're never available.
Yeah.
Then your words are hollow, right? Your words are hollow.
That makes sense. So how do we help leaders? I mean, assuming that we have, great leaders to help them get higher employee engagement rates out of the team?
Well, that's the question everyone wants to ask. We need to get higher levels of engagement because we've done an employee survey and we see where our engagement numbers are and they're not where we'd like them to be. So here's what we can say, that ever since we've been talking about engagement, in part because of the great work of the Gallup people, right? And the Gallup people will tell us that the surveys say that the engagement number is not really moving. We're spending millions and millions of dollars trying to improve engagement and the needle is not moving much. I mean, it moved a little bit in the right direction at the start of the pandemic and then sort of went back. Well, I think the thing to think about here is, I mean, there's certainly a role for leaders in role modeling, as we've been talking about here, right? If you're not engaged, far less likely your team will be. But let's start with what engagement actually is. Engagement is people willing to raise their hand, people willing to do more than what's absolutely necessary. People being willing to provide extra effort, right? And so we really can't make them do that. People choose that. Mm-hmm. People choose to say, I'm in, I'm committed, I'm engaged. It's not something we do to people. It's something people choose. So rather than us throwing stuff at people to try to get them to be engaged, what we should be doing as leaders is helping them choose it, because there's tremendous benefit for all of us to be engaged. And I believe that almost everybody would prefer to be engaged at work than not. Some people say, I just want to come to work and do my job and then leave. But some people that say that would really love to have, I mean, I'm not saying that they have to put in an extra 12 hours a week. I'm not saying that, but I think ultimately people want to say this place matters. Like, I want to leave this place better than where I got when I came. Like, and some people have never had a job where they felt engaged. Just because they haven't doesn't mean they wouldn't prefer it. So our job as a leader is to help them make that choice, because when we choose to be engaged, good things happen. Like we enjoy our work more, we're more satisfied, we're more productive, we find more meaning in our work, we're likely to stay longer. And all of these are things that we want. That's why we want greater engagement. But we can't, it's not something we do to people. It's something we do with people. So we've got to role model it. Then we've got to be clear about what it actually is. And then our job becomes, how do we help them engage how do we help them choose to be engaged, right?
You've written on your trilogy is about distance work, distance manager, distance teams. Can you talk a little bit about that and how this move to hybrid is impacting that? What are some tips we can give to people to get that engagement up in terms of how we do it when we're not face to face, like literally face to face, or physically face to face often?
Sure. Well, so let me say two things. So first of all, if you've got, there's still an awful lot of discussion going on about what the right answer is and where should people be and should they come in, should they not come in, what is hybrid? So let's just start with the hybrid piece. If you've got some of your people that you're seeing regularly in the office and others that you aren't, you have a new challenge as a leader, which is to make absolutely sure that you're staying connected with and helping the people who you aren't seeing face to face be engaged. You got to redouble your efforts, and the stuff we were talking about earlier about creating interaction, right? So I think that the biggest key to helping give people the choice and helping them see about what the value of engaging is when they're remote is to encourage it in them, reward engaging kinds of behaviors, and ask them what they need to be more engaged. The longer people work at distance, the more insular they become, the more their work becomes their task list. And what we have to help people see is that their job, Sam, is more than just their task, right? It's more than just this task list right here, right? It's my work plus the work of the team. That's my job. It's not just my task list. And so it's easier for people to see that when they're walking down a hall and seeing other people. It's harder for people to see that when all they see is the far wall of the bedroom, the extra bedroom that's now their office, right? So we as leaders have to help them see that purpose, help them see that vision, help them see how they are and can be connected and collaborate with their teammates. And all that can happen without them being face to face, but we have to work harder as leaders to make it happen for them.
Yeah, that's amazing inspiration. Thank you, Kevin. I know that I've been jotting some notes down here or typing some notes. I look forward to listening back to this and to help myself with my own team drive better leaders. I appreciate it. Where can people find more information about your trilogy?
Well, they can find more information about the 3 books, Long Distance Leader, Long Distance Teammate, Long Distance Team, by going to our website, kevineikenberry.com, KevinEikenberry.com, where you can find about all of our products and services, including the books. And if you want to get connected with me, or if you have a question that either you were with us live and didn't want to ask, or you didn't want to ask in a public forum, or you just want to talk to me, you can find my email there. You can get connected with me there on the website. But I would just, where some of you actually are, which is go to LinkedIn and connect with me on LinkedIn and say, hey, I heard you on one of the conversations you had with Sam on the 17th Floor podcast conversations. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, be connected with you, and be helpful to you, whether it's you as an individual leader, you as an HR professional for your organization.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to encourage all of you on the 17th floor listening to this live or on the replay to add your thoughts. What are your experiences in going from being a great manager to a great leader, or helping others do that? And let's have that conversation on an ongoing basis. Help each other out. That is the purpose of the 17th floor. So we look forward to those chats here inside the community. And be sure to pay attention to our networking events that are Ask the Expert events that we're going to be having, hopefully increasing that frequency because the response has been so good, but at least once a month. Watch for that schedule, add them to your calendar, follow us, and check out our LinkedIn profile where you will get notifications. Thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate your time once again. Thank you, everybody, for paying attention.
Sam, it was a pleasure to be back with you, and thanks to you, and thanks to all of you who are invested enough in yourself as a leader to join us today. Hope you got at least one thing you can go back and apply immediately.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, everyone.